I caught my fiancé tangled in the sheets with my best friend. He smirked, his voice cold and careless. "What are you gonna do, cry?" I didn't. I smiled, turned around, and left. That was the night everything inside me went quiet. By morning, my phone was lit up with missed calls from both of them. The panic in their messages was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Before I tell you how I turned their betrayal into a masterpiece of revenge, stay with me, because this story doesn't begin in that bedroom. It begins long before, when everything still looked perfect. My name is Clara, I'm 34, and until that night, I thought I was building a fairy tale life. My fiancé, Evan, was charming in all the right ways, the kind of man who fooled everyone, including my mother. On social media, we were that couple, picture perfect, nauseatingly in love, planning our autumn vineyard wedding. And my best friend Jenna, my maid of honor, my chosen sister, was right there beside me, smiling in every photo. For 15 years, she'd been part of my story. First heartbreaks, college nights, my father's funeral. She'd held my hand through it all. I trusted her with my life. I just didn't realize she was already rehearsing for the role of the woman who would destroy it. It started with small things, late nights, gym sessions, Evan's new obsession with getting in shape for the wedding. And who did he hire as his personal trainer? Jenna. At the time, it felt like fate, my favorite people working towards something beautiful together. Looking back, it was the setup for a perfect tragedy. Evan began coming home later, claiming client meetings that never ended, gym sessions that ran extra long. His phone was always face down, always. When I asked who he was texting, he laughed, called me paranoid, insecure, controlling. And like a fool, I apologized for the storm my gut had tried to warn me about. A month before my world collapsed, the three of us sat under the soft glow of candlelight at our favorite Italian place, me, Evan, and Jenna. Laughter filled the air, wine glasses clinked, and for a moment it almost felt real. Then Evan slipped his arm around me and said, "I'm the luckiest man alive. I'm marrying the most amazing woman, and I've got the best friend anyone could ask for." He looked at me for the first half of that sentence, but when he said best friend, his gaze lingered on Jenna, just a second too long. My smile froze, my stomach twisted, that quiet whisper of dread clawing its way up my spine. I told myself it was nothing, just the wine, just nerves, just me. It's strange how our instincts always know the truth before our hearts catch up. But that night, I still believed in the fairy tale. The next week would burn it all to ash. I had a 2-day business conference out of town, long dull meetings, lukewarm coffee, the kind of corporate misery I usually dreaded. But this one mattered. A promotion was on the line. Evan had helped me pack, kissed my forehead, and told me to go make them remember your name. Jenna even texted that morning, "Good luck, you're going to crush it." That text used to make me smile. Now it makes my skin crawl. The conference was exactly what I expected. Endless PowerPoints and fake smiles. By the end of day 1, all I wanted was to curl up in my hotel room with overpriced room service and the sound of Evan's voice. We talked that night. He said he was home, watching the game, missing me like crazy. His voice sounded tired. I know why now. The universe, in its cruel humor, decided to hand me an early ending. The keynote speaker canceled, and by noon on the second day, the conference was over. "Go home, enjoy the surprise break," my boss said. And I did. I couldn't wait to see him. The drive home was 4 hours of pure anticipation. I blasted our old 80s playlist, singing at the top of my lungs, imagining his face when I walked through the door. It felt like winning the lottery, an extra day and a half together, unplanned and perfect. I even stopped at our favorite little market, the one with the imported cheeses and the overpriced wine we both pretended to understand. I picked out his favorite Cabernet, a wedge of brie, and a few things for a cozy night in. My heart was light. My mind was full of us. Then my phone buzzed, a text from him. "Sleep well, my love. Miss you like crazy." I smiled, typed back, "Miss you more. Can't wait to be home." I told myself the tiny lie would make the surprise sweeter. The streets were quiet when I turned onto our block, the kind of silence that feels safe. The house glowed warm from the inside. The lights were on. My chest filled with that familiar comfort of coming home to the person you love. I didn't know that behind those glowing windows, love was already dead, and I was about to find its body. I clicked the car door shut, my grocery bag heavy in one hand and a cheap suitcase in the other, already tasting that first sip of the Cabernet I'd bought as a surprise. What I saw parked 2 houses down stopped time, a cherry-red Mustang tucked under the oak, Jenna's car, impossible to ignore. I told myself every possible explanation until the house swallowed my excuses whole and the truth started to breathe. I fumbled for keys, the metal cold against my palm, and walked up the path with the kind of practiced quiet people use when they don't want to wake a sleeping life. The porch air was crisp. The groceries suddenly felt like stones. I eased the key in and turned it as if I were a thief sneaking in. The downstairs was dark, except for a faint domestic glow under the cabinets. I kicked off my heels and set the bag on the granite countertop, the sound absurdly loud in the hush. "Evan," I called, my voice small. No answer. His car was in the drive. He had to be home. Then, from the stairs, a sound, a low murmur that became a laugh, soft, reckless, unmistakably Jenna's. My stomach dropped like an elevator, and every rational lie I'd been feeding myself shattered. I moved before I remembered deciding to, leaving the wine and cheese on the counter. My steps were swallowed by the runner as my heartbeat turned into a drum in my ears. The bedroom door sat ajar. Voices, his and hers, threaded through the crack. Then the sickening rhythm of the mattress creaking. Our mattress, the one we bought together, the one where we planned a family. My hand shook on the doorknob. For a flash I pictured driving away, pretending I'd never come home. But I couldn't walk away from the thing I needed to see. I pushed the door open. There they were, tangled in white linen, frozen like bad actors when the curtain falls. The lamp cast long shapes that reminded me of monsters. Jenna saw me first. Her face turned primitive with panic. Evan's mouth fell open, then slid into something worse than shock. An ugly, defensive smirk. He pulled the sheet around his waist, looked me dead in the eye, and said with venom thin as ice, "What are you going to do?" Cry? Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not wild, just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels final. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why. I just reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and let the flash cut through the room like a blade. One photo, then another. Their faces twisted in panic, like actors realizing the play was over and the audience was still watching. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The silence said everything. I turned and walked out, slow, deliberate. The sound of my heels, the only heartbeat left in that house. I didn't look back. I opened the door, slipped on my shoes, and walked into the night. And as I closed the door behind me, I said out loud into the quiet house, "I'm just getting started." They screamed my name, scrambled for the sheets, begged for explanations they'd never get. But I already had what I came for, proof. Cold, undeniable, permanent. In that moment, I wasn't the broken woman they expected. I was the witness, the executioner. And the story they thought they were writing had just changed authors. I lowered the phone and looked at them. Two strangers trapped in their own shame, their faces contorted with panic and fury. I felt nothing, not love, not loss, just clarity. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady, eerily calm. "Thank you for making this so easy." He didn't raise his voice, he didn't swear. He just stood, eyes steady, the envelope trembling slightly in his hand. And in that silence, I realized something. Men like Wesley don't explode. They implode, then rebuild as something sharper. Then I turned. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I walked out of the room, down the stairs, past the flowers he'd bought me last week, still sitting in a vase, still pretending to be alive. Behind me, Evan's voice cracked into rage. "That's it. You're just walking away? Clara, get back here, you coward." I stopped at the front door. I didn't turn around. The house felt smaller, suffocating under the weight of everything that had just died inside it. "No," I said, my voice echoing through the hollow space between us. "I'm just getting started." I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my purse, and left. The suitcase, the wine, the ruins of my old life still inside. I didn't look back. The road swallowed me whole. For the first 10 minutes, I drove through pure, merciful numbness. Then came the shaking, a violent tremor that rattled through my body until my knuckles turned white around the steering wheel. Still, not a single tear fell. Just the steady, quiet hum of rage burning in my veins. I pulled off at a flickering roadside motel, the kind that smelled like regret and bleach. I paid in cash, locked the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the stiff bed. The air tasted like dust. Outside, headlights passed by in long, ghostly streaks, painting the ceiling in flashes of light. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent for hours. They were probably still panicking, spinning lies, crafting alibis, rewriting their own betrayal into something survivable. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, watching the movie of my downfall replay in my mind. Evan's smirk, Jenna's wide, horrified eyes. The betrayal wasn't heartbreak, it was an execution, and the woman who'd died in that room, the soft, trusting version of me, was gone. The one sitting there now was someone else entirely, colder, sharper, awake. And she was already making a plan. The first vibration came at 3:04 a.m. Sharp, insistent, cutting through the motel's silence like a blade. Then another, then another. By sunrise, the phone was shaking so violently on the nightstand it looked possessed. 47 missed calls from Evan, 23 from Jenna. And the texts, a gallery of desperation, written by two people who suddenly realized they weren't the victims. They thought they could control the story with guilt and half-truths. They didn't realize I was already 3 moves ahead. I scrolled, each message more pathetic than the last. "Jenna, Clara, please call me. It was a mistake. I love you. Don't throw away our friendship." Evan, "Babe, where are you? Please don't do anything stupid. I can explain. It's not what it looked like." Then Jenna again, panic bleeding through her words. "Don't tell Mark, please, I'm begging you. You'll ruin my life." And then came the final text, sent just after 7 a.m. when Evan's panic curdled into anger. "You better not ruin my life over this. I swear to God, you'll regret it." Ruin his life. The audacity almost made me laugh. They'd already demolished mine and thought they still got to negotiate the terms of their own fallout. I didn't reply. I didn't even block them, not yet. I just sat there, scrolling, detached and eerily calm. They expected the meltdown, the tears, the begging, the dramatic scene. But they'd miscalculated. They always had. They mistook kindness for weakness. What they didn't know was that this wasn't my first encounter with betrayal, and this time I'd been ready. A month earlier, I'd been digging through our shared iPad, searching for a tax document. Evan was still logged into his Messenger account. He was usually meticulous, paranoid even, but that day he slipped. And what I found was rot. Message after message between him and Jenna. Not a few, hundreds. Flirty, disgusting, coordinated. They weren't sneaking moments, they were scheduling them. My work trips, my visits to my mother, even the days I worked late. They'd turned my calendar into their playground. And the cherry on top? He'd been paying her for training sessions with our joint credit card, my money funding their affair. The hypocrisy was almost poetic. That night, hands trembling, I'd taken screenshots of everything, every timestamp, every message, every emoji, and saved them to a private, encrypted cloud folder. I told myself I was being paranoid. I almost deleted them. Thank God I didn't. Now, sitting in that stale motel room, I realized I wasn't broken. I was armed, I had evidence, I had leverage, I had receipts, literal and digital. So while they were drowning in their own panic, I went to work. My first call wasn't to a friend or a sister, it was to the bank. A woman named Linda answered, the kind of voice that sounds like warm coffee and no judgment. I told her I needed to immediately separate my joint accounts due to irreconcilable differences. She didn't pry. "You got it, sweetheart," she said, gentle but firm. "We'll take care of everything on our end. You just take care of yourself." Within an hour, I'd moved my savings, my salary, my inheritance, everything that was mine, into a private account under my name alone. I froze the joint card, removed him as an authorized user from my personal ones. Then came the email, short, surgical, devastating. Subject, wedding cancellation, Clara and Evan. When I hit send, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like reclamation, like pulling my own name out of his mouth. I didn't shout, didn't post, didn't plead my case. I just disappeared and let the silence do the talking. People underestimate what quiet can do. It makes the guilty fill in the blanks themselves. That's when I understood. Silence had become my weapon. I wasn't planning to destroy him. I was planning to reclaim every piece of myself he'd borrowed. Every password, every plan, every version of me that apologized for his mistakes. There's a strange power in unmaking your own cage. You start realizing revenge isn't about fire, it's about freedom. The flames come later when you finally stop asking for permission to be whole. The subject line was a single surgical sentence. Wedding cancellation, Clara and Evan. The body was even shorter. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the wedding scheduled for October 12th is canceled. Please consider this formal notice. Losing deposits was a small cost compared to the freedom I'd bought with that one terse email. I spent the rest of the morning methodically untying every knot that tied me to him. With every password I changed and every account I reclaimed, a little more of that old life fell away, and the woman who remained was getting dangerous in the best possible way. I started small and efficient, new passwords on every account, streaming, shopping, even the electric bill. A tedious, oddly cleansing ritual. Each new combination felt like peeling a layer of someone else's name off my life. Meanwhile, their frantic calls became a river of voicemails. I let them pile up until curiosity pulled me to one. Evan's voice, raw and performative, choked through the speaker. "Clara, I love you. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Please, please talk to me." It was Oscar-worthy. It was also worthless. I had months of messages that told the true story. I deleted the voicemail. I blocked their numbers. For hours, the phone buzzed and begged and screamed. I let it. Every ring was a confession they didn't mean to make. When it finally stopped, the quiet wasn't emptiness. It was power. The kind that hums in your bones and tells you that you've already won. I realized then, silence wasn't my punishment. It was my answer. Silence, a deep, reverent silence, settled over the motel like a blessing. The rage inside me didn't vanish, it sharpened. And somewhere beneath that steel, a quieter ache took shape. Not for him, but for the version of me that still wanted to believe in good endings. It stopped being blind pain and became something with direction, fuel, not ruin. At noon, a knock rattled the motel door. I froze and let it come again, louder, more insistent. Through the peephole, I watched Evan and Jenna stand there, his hair a mess, his face pale, her eyes swollen, refusing to meet mine. They looked small and ridiculous, and I felt nothing but an empty, iron calm. He pounded like a man who expected tears. "Clara, open the door. We need to talk." He had the audacity to call me childish. The man who'd betrayed me in our bed had the nerve to lecture me about behavior. I almost laughed, but I stayed silent until they gave up and walked away, shoulders heavy and pride bruised. I checked out without asking for a refund and drove straight to the one person who never hesitated. My sister Brooke. Brooke, a no-nonsense divorce lawyer with a moral compass and a license for bullshit detection, answered the phone like an anchor. "Come here," she said. "Now." I pulled over and let the dam break. The ugly sob that ripped out of me emptied the last of the fear. When I finished, Brooke was stone-cold calm. "That son of a," she said, the words clipped, her voice folding into steel. "Drive here. We'll have one glass of wine, then we will burn their worlds down." Arriving at Brooke's felt like stepping into a fortress. The plan was beginning. Brooke threw the door open before I'd even shut off the engine and crushed me in a hug that felt like armor. Her house smelled like coffee and order, the exact opposite of the chaos I'd dragged with me. We sat on her couch with a bottle of expensive red wine between us, while I finally showed someone the screenshots I'd been hoarding like contraband. Brooke's face went hard as stone as she scrolled. From a lawyer's eye, this wasn't drama. This was evidence. I knew then that the story would no longer belong to them. It would belong to anyone who could read the receipts and the timestamps and see the truth spelled out in pixels. That night felt like a confessional and a planning session rolled into one. Brooke handled the documents like a surgeon, calm, efficient, unsentimental. "They documented their own downfall," she said, voice low. "From a legal standpoint, these are gold." The next morning, predictably, the narrative manipulation tour began. Mutual friends texted with worried emojis and careful words. "He's devastated. It was a misunderstanding. She's a mess." It was the same playbook they'd always used. Spin, Redirect, make me the unstable one. It was time to deploy the first real move. Jenna had a husband, Wesley, a good man, quiet, practical, the kind who built things for a living and believed in the woman beside him. He'd helped fund her home gym. He loved her. He deserved the truth. The thought of telling him felt like detonating a bomb in the middle of a life that had been built on lies. I paced Brooke's guest room for hours, the moral weight of what I was about to do heavy in my chest. Brooke's voice cut through it like a blade. He has a right to know. He's living a lie. The kindest thing you can do is tell him she was right. With a hand that trembled, but a decision that didn't, I found Wesley's number and sent a simple text. "Wesley, this is Clara. I need to talk. It's urgent." He replied immediately with concern, threading every word. "Is everything okay?" I typed back with a small, steady cruelty. "No. Can you meet for coffee tomorrow?" The next morning I sat across from him in a small, neutral cafe and slid a plain manila envelope across the table. He opened it like someone handling an animal that might bite. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then the first page, then the next. I watched the color drain from his face as confusion turned to horror and then to a raw, breaking grief. He mumbled no under his breath, eyes glued to messages that timed and planned their rendezvous while he thought she was at yoga or at work. He saw the pictures I'd taken in our bedroom. He saw the mocking jokes. When he finally looked up, his eyes were a wrecking ball. I let him sit with it because he deserved space to feel the betrayal that had been hidden from him. The room was quiet, except for the soft clink of his untouched coffee. He stood slowly, holding the envelope like a weapon, and left, the hurt transforming into a cold kind of resolve. When Wesley looked up from the envelope, his eyes were hard as flint. Pain was still raw, but it was being forged into something colder and more dangerous. A new kind of rage. He said, low and dangerous, "Thank you for telling me, Clara." I need to go, stood, and left his untouched coffee cooling on the table, while he clutched the proof like a weapon. In that second, I understood I wasn't standing alone on a revenge path. I was standing at the head of an army of betrayed people who finally had the receipts. Wesley didn't call me again that day, but silence was not inaction. It was a storm assembling. While he plotted in private, the outside world tried to rewrite the scene. Evan and Jenna pivoted, casting me as the hysterical runaway. My mother rang in tears. "Clara, honey," Evan called. "He's crying. He's so worried." The audacity of him dialing my mother while he begged me to come home made my stomach drop with fury. I told her firmly, voice flat with controlled heat, "He is lying. I am safe with Brooke. Do not believe a word he says." The next morning brought the real turn. Jenna, who had cultivated a glossy little fitness persona online, went live as usual at 10, except this time the feed was not a workout. It was a public unmasking. Brooke and I were mid-coffee when a friend texted a link. The live video jittered on my screen, shot shaky and intimate from Wesley's phone. Jenna was on the floor, sobbing, surrounded by suitcases and designer boxes. Wesley stood stone-faced, calm in a way that made the whole thing surgical. "Tell them," he said, and she did in front of 200 viewers, confessing a months-long affair with the man she claimed to love. Wesley held up the printed screenshots to the camera like Exhibit A and narrated each betrayal with a voice that broke once and then steadied. Then, as if to punctuate the moment, he hurled one of her prized kettlebells through a floor-to-ceiling mirror. Glass screamed. The video went black. then circulated like wildfire. Her curated world shattered in 10 minutes. Her followers, once adoring, became savage. The humiliation was instant and total, and watching it, for a fragment of time, I felt a grim satisfaction. Within hours, Jenna's Instagram was a wasteland of snake emojis and hate. She fled town, Wesley filed for divorce, her career evaporated. For Evan, control slipped from his fingers. He tried damage control that evening, a long, self-pitying Facebook post full of "I made mistakes" and "I was lost" lines, meant to manufacture sympathy and rewrite responsibility. Brooke and I read it together and laughed at how thin his theater was. "Confusing time," I read aloud, disbelief turning to contempt. Brooke's smile curved like a blade. "He thinks that post will save him," she said. "He has no idea what's coming." His pity tour was his last polite act. I still had one trump card. A quiet, devastating cut I had been saving for the exact right moment. Remember our engagement party at the winery? All laughter, clinking glasses, and Evan standing in the soft sunset with a champagne flute, promising the world? That footage became my weapon. I spent 2 hours in Brooke's home office, quiet, methodical, pulling his tearful speech into an editing program and lining it up, frame by frame, with the incriminating screenshots that proved his whole performance was a lie. The contrast would do the talking for me, his polished loyalty beside his ugly texts. And when it went live, people would finally see what I'd been living with. I clipped his misty-eyed lines and cut them against the messages. "Audrey, you are my rock." Slammed into, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." "Audrey will be gone all day." I let a mournful piano bleed under the montage until it felt like a funeral march. Then I uploaded the unlisted video to YouTube and dropped the link in the comments of his pathetic, self-pitying Facebook post. No caption, no explanation, just the evidence. 5 minutes later, the first "oh my god" appeared, then another. Friends who'd cried at the winery watched the footage and felt betrayed anew. The post turned into a battlefield overnight, and his profile disappeared by morning. But the damage was done. The clip had already seeded itself through the town like a virus. He called me from a blocked number that afternoon. I almost didn't pick up, but I wanted to hear the sound of him breaking. His voice was raw and small, begging, pleading for mercy. "Please, Clara, take it down. My boss saw it. My family, they won't speak to me. You've destroyed me." I listened to him unravel for a few delicious seconds, letting his sobs fill the silence. Then, calm as ice, I said 2 words and ended the call. "What are you going to do? Cry?" And just like that, the circle closed. The same words that once broke me now sounded like victory. Silence followed. The clean, absolute quiet that comes after everything explodes. The war was over. They had built their funeral pyre. I had simply lit the match. The video didn't just explode in our small circle. It detonated straight into Evan's professional life. Reputation was his currency, and overnight it became worthless. By the next morning, word had reached the corporate office of his financial firm. His boss, the kind of man who preached family values between golf rounds, called him in for a meeting that everyone in town already knew would be his last. The man who once boasted that he had it all together was watching it all collapse, and all I had to do was stay quiet and let gravity do its work. Through whispers and screenshots, I heard the news travel, indefinite leave pending review. Everyone knew what that meant. His corner office, his 6-figure salary, his crisp suits, all circling the drain. Meanwhile, Jenna had gone completely dark. She fled to her parents' house out of state, humiliated, her influencer career evaporating faster than her fake tan. Wesley, on the other hand, wasted no time. Brooke called it a lawyer's dream. With the evidence I'd handed over, his attorney would have a field day. No amicable split, no quiet settlement. He was coming for everything: the house, the assets, and the last ounce of dignity she had left. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. While their lives unraveled, mine became a checklist of survival. Brooke guided me through the legal maze of separation like a general planning a campaign. We owned a house together. That was the messy part. I hired movers, bought boxes, and started the slow, deliberate act of erasing him from my space. It was strangely purifying: the sound of packing tape, the scrape of cardboard, the rhythm of closure. One by one, I lifted pieces of our life together and decided their fate. A photo from Mexico, trash, his favorite sweater, donate. The more I packed, the lighter I became. Our mutual friends divided themselves like a courtroom. Most sided with me. Proof is persuasive after all. My phone overflowed with messages of shock and solidarity. A few tried to play peacemaker, the ones who believed in second chances and couples therapy. One friend, Sarah, called with that trembling tone of pity. "Clara, maybe you shouldn't throw it all away. People make mistakes." I didn't hesitate. "This wasn't a mistake," I said, voice sharp as glass. "It was a strategy. And I'm done being part of their plan." The silence that followed was the sound of a boundary being built. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clean. The hardest part was telling my parents. They had loved Evan, treated him like family. I drove to their house, the same one where he'd asked for my hand months earlier. I told them everything except the video. That would have been too cruel. My mother wept quietly. My father said nothing at all, just stood and pulled me into a hug that steadied my entire world. "We're here for you," he said simply, "whatever you need." And that was the anchor I didn't know I'd been waiting for. A few weeks later, I was in a new apartment across town. The noise had finally faded. No more calls, no more chaos. The quiet felt foreign at first, heavy. But then, as I sat among unpacked boxes and the hum of my own peace, I realized that silence was mine. The silence in my new apartment was enormous, the kind that echoed when I set a glass down. After years of shaping my life around someone else's orbit, I had to learn how to move through the quiet without feeling like I was missing a limb. The first week was clumsy. I burned pasta because I forgot it was boiling, lost track of time staring at the wall, and fell asleep to the hum of a TV I wasn't really watching. Healing I was learning wasn't graceful. It was jagged and unpredictable. A rhythm you learn only by tripping through it. I wasn't rebuilding a life. I was relearning how to exist inside one that finally belonged to me. Work became my structure. The promotion I'd been up for finally came through, and I buried myself in the deadlines, the meetings, the sense of competence that didn't rely on anyone else. But nights were harder. Dinner for one, TV alone, a bed that felt too big, too empty, too honest. About a month after moving in, I was at a small cafe near my place, editing a presentation when I saw him. Evan. He looked ruined, thinner, hollow-eyed, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. He didn't notice me at first, and for a heartbeat I thought about leaving, disappearing before he could drag his shadow into my sunlight. But then I remembered I had nothing to run from. I stayed, pretended to type. He spotted me, froze. Then, as if pulled by habit or guilt, he bought his coffee and walked straight toward my table. "Clara," he said softly, voice cracked and unsteady. I looked up slowly, face calm and unreadable. "Evan," I said. He gestured to the chair. "Can I sit?" "I'd rather you didn't." He sat anyway. His eyes searched mine like there was something familiar left to find. "You look good." "I'm busy." He stumbled through a string of apologies, tears threatening, voice trembling. "I lost everything. My job, my friends, my reputation. Pages gone. It's all gone." He was waiting for pity, for the woman who used to save him. But that woman didn't live here anymore. I closed my laptop slowly, met his eyes, and said, "That sounds like a you problem. You made your bed, lie in it." Then I stood, packed my bag, and walked away. He didn't follow. He just sat there. A ghost at the table where my forgiveness used to be. Outside, the afternoon sun was blinding. I didn't feel rage or sadness, only a strange, liberating stillness. I was free, truly, completely free. Freedom, I realized, wasn't loud or triumphant. It was quiet. It was peace. Life began to rebuild itself, softly. The same quiet that once felt like death now sounded like rebirth. Silence had followed me from the ruins, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being my armor and became my home. I filled my weekends with hikes through pine trails outside the city, the smell of earth grounding me. I started seeing old friends again, the ones who'd disappeared during my perfect relationship. I remembered how to laugh without glancing over my shoulder. Brooke stayed my anchor, dinners once a week, laughter over wine, her voice reminding me that survival wasn't the same as living. "Celebrate the small wins," she'd say, and I did, each one a brick in the foundation of who I was becoming. I used to think healing meant forgetting, but it turned out to mean readiness. The moment you stop looking for the person who broke you and start leaving the door open for someone who won't. Then, 6 months later, on a sunlit hiking trail, I met Sawyer, a landscape photographer with kind eyes and a smile that reached the corners. We fell into step naturally, conversation easy, unforced. He didn't ask about the past, and I didn't volunteer it. I didn't need to. The spark that flickered between us wasn't about rewriting what had been lost. It was about finally having the space to start something new. The next week, Sawyer asked me to grab coffee. My hands shook as I said yes. My guard was still so high, it scraped the atmosphere. But honesty felt like the only way forward, so over cappuccinos and cautious smiles, I told him the short version, that I'd just escaped a broken engagement built on lies. I braced for judgment, for discomfort, for distance. Instead, he just nodded and said quietly, "I'm sorry that happened to you. No one deserves that." No probing questions, no pity, just kindness, simple, steady, real. That was the moment I realized I wasn't looking for a rescuer. I was learning how to stand next to someone who didn't need to save me to see my worth. We took things slow, very slow. Sawyer was patient in ways that didn't feel performative. He didn't fill silence with reassurance. He just showed up again and again. He left his phone face up on the table. He told the truth before I even needed to ask. They were small gestures, but to me, they were seismic. He was everything Evan had only pretended to be. Months passed quietly, softly. One night, while we were cooking dinner together in my apartment, the smell of garlic filling the air and some old soul song playing in the background, He stopped chopping vegetables and looked at me with that steady, easy smile. "You know," he said, "I'm glad that idiot broke your heart." I laughed, surprised. "You're glad?" He nodded, voice sincere. "Yeah, because if he hadn't, I never would have found you." In that moment, I knew I was healed. The scars were still there, but they didn't ache anymore. They were just proof I'd survived, proof that I'd rebuilt. I hear things now and then that Evan moved away, working some quiet job far below the pedestal he once stood on. That Jenna's back with her parents, divorced, clocking into a life that used to look so shiny from the outside. I don't feel satisfaction anymore, just indifference. When they asked what I was going to do, they expected tears, not transformation. But revenge was never about ruin. It was about reclamation. I didn't burn for them. I burned what they left behind. Now, when I wake in the quiet, I don't hear echoes of betrayal. I hear the sound of something rebuilt, steady and alive. Because the best revenge isn't vengeance at all. It's becoming untouchable. If you've ever risen from the ashes like that, stay a while. The next story begins where this silence ends.